All right, so this is question 20. Here we got two classes. Let's go investigate class tests. See if there's any like private or static variables or methods that we can look at and maybe instantly select D from, right? We got public string data. Okay, nothing wrong with that. We got a constructor that takes in nothing. That's good to see. We have a constructor that takes in just a string. Also good to see. And then we have a two-string method that'll probably be useful for this guy right here, right? So nothing glaringly obvious that'll make me select D. So let's go ahead and start from main and go line by line, see where it gets us, right? So here we're just declaring some test pointers, right? So I'll say like like T1 here, T2 there, T3 here. We're not doing anything right now, but in the next few lines we'll update them, right? T1 is equal to a new test, okay? Here's my test object. And what does it do? What does it do when I run it through the default constructor? Or I guess not the default, but the constructor that takes in no arguments, right? So we're down here now. We're saying that data is equal to this string right here, default. So I will denote that as D, since well the only other strings that are present in this code are updated and changed. So I can kind of like denote updated by a U and changed by a C just for I don't know, to be easier, right? Because I don't want to be writing like default in this little box, right? So then T2 is equal to null, so it's pointing to nothing basically. That was certainly an arrow of all time. And then T3 is equal to a new test, and it's going to take in a string, right? So I'm not going to go to the same constructor I went to here. I'm going to go to the constructor that takes in a single string. So that constructor can be found here, right? And I don't know if I've actually touched on like this keyword, but what that's saying is that this object, right? So in this case, T3, so T3's data is going to be equal to the data that you passed in, right? And you might be asking, well, why did I even need that to begin with, right? Because I was able to assign T1's data to default just fine. Well, here's the thing, right? The parameter's name is called data, right? And what is your variable's name? Well, it's called data, right? So if you had within here, if you had data is equal to data, well, which data are you talking about? Are you talking about this data right here? Are you trying to assign this data to this field? Or are you trying to assign whatever is in this field to this, right? It's it would be too vague, it'd be too confusing. Java wouldn't know which data field you're talking about, right? The argument or the one that's already present inside your object. So what we do to, I guess, demystify or clear up the confusion, right, is we use this dot. So this dot variable name, it's just saying that this object, or T3 in this case, his data is going to be equal to whatever I just passed in. Now we just passed in updated, the string updated. So that's what I will, I guess, put in this object, right? And I'll denote it with a U. Okay, so now that's these three lines done. Now here's like the bulk of the problem, right? Where I guess like do like reassignments. So here, all this is it's saying whatever T2 is pointing to, T3 should also point to that. So what is T2 pointing to? It's pointing to null. So that is exactly what T3 should also be pointing to, right? And because nothing is referencing this object, it kind of gets collected by the garbage collection system that Java has. So it's not a memory leak; it just gets collected, right? T1 is equal to T2. What that's saying is that whatever T1 is being, or I guess whatever T1 is pointing to, T2 should also point to it. So what is T1 pointing to? This object that holds the string default. So then T2 ought to point to that as well, right? So now they're both pointing to the same object. Um, And now we have to do, we have to run this line now, right? T2 is equal to a new object that takes in a string, that string being changed, right? So instead of pointing to this, it's going to point over here, right, to another object of type test. And it's going to go through this constructor, right? This dot data. So in other words, T2's data is equal to whatever I passed in. I passed in changed. So T2's data should be equal to changed. Now this last line is just saying whatever T3 is pointing to, null. T1 should also point to that. So T1 is going to point to null, right? And because nothing's referencing this object, it kind of gets collected by the garbage collection system. And then lastly, we just have to print out an object, that object being T3. What is T3 pointing to? It's pointing to null. Now you remember, I think in the previous question, I said that all print functions in Java have a sort of null checker, right? So what is T3 pointing to? It's pointing to nothing. It's pointing to null. So instead of trying to access T3's toString method, right? Instead of trying to access this, it will gracefully print out null instead, right? But because null is not one of these three options, we would be forced to circle D, right? And of course, we can go ahead and check that with our practice test here. What is this, question 20? Yeah. And yeah, it does look like D would be the answer you'd want to pick on the test. I'll see you guys in the next video.